have some highlights from it. I took these are my iPhone shots from the conference. If you could you see these here? These coming.
Well, I saw them on the phone
Yeah.
while I was traveling, so
Okay.
that wasn't really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah. Right. So there's Heather with Anthony Peratt, and this is my little travel log of the thing. So here are some shots from it. This was the intro to it. Okay, it's not bad for an iPhone stuff. So we can walk through your presentation. I don't know if you want to do that, but I got a lot of it.
Well, we might do that sometime later.
Yeah. But just a quick scan.
Yeah, I should say that I wouldn't be available on Sunday because my band is having a concert.
Oh, nice. All right.
Right at that time, so.
Oh, cool.
No
Okay.
chance. Yeah.
Okay. Where are you playing? What's the venue?
It's one of our local clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Like a rock bar, something like that,
Okay, fun. So, let's see. I mean, we could walk through the conference if you want, just with ideas that came up. And, and of course, Michael Claridge spoke right after Eugene, so this was some of his presentation ideas.
Well,
Did
I
he,
can
did
say
he
that.
did he talk at all about Sapphire, or was it more general?
What's your read, Eugene, on this?
Well, he only mentioned it near the end, and he didn't really talk about it much. He only gave a couple of teasers, like he said that they have an idea how these fast radio bursts might happen during the breakdown of plasma double layers. So that was probably the most interesting new thing in terms of Sapphire.
Right. This looks familiar, James. That's something you were doing there, right?
Yeah, it looks like your axial radial flow.
Right. James has a great model of this that he's done on the for the Ethereal Matters website.
Yeah, but this is basically the same thing
Yeah,
that Don Scott did.
Right.
I mean, he actually references the same papers that I do in my presentation.
Right.
And even some of the pictures are the same.
Yeah.
So there was an interesting point that he made about the spacing of planets, how in this Birkeland current, as analyzed by Don Scott, there should be pretty much equal spacings between these maxima of this function of, say, current density or magnetic field strength. But in our system we observe more of a logarithmic spacing, and which means not linear. So for example, each next planet is roughly 2 times farther than the previous one, but not exactly, but somewhere along that line. So they're not equally spaced. And what he found is that exoplanetary systems also seem to follow that kind of logarithmic law, even though with different powers. So you can see these slopes are different when he takes the logarithm graph. But one interesting thing, and I've discussed this with him later at our sort of Q&A panel, but it wasn't actually a Q&A panel, it was just a lunch where random people would speak to us. So he has found, as far as I understood, that it's not exactly 2 to the power of 1, so that the distances do not exactly double, but slightly less than that. So it's 2 to the power of something like 0.86 or something like that. And I've remembered that previously I've had conversation with him. So I was asking him a question: why is the solar wind, behaving in the way it does? And in particular, I was asking him that the solar wind density changes not as 1/r squared, as would be expected for, well, for example, the solar radiation changes like that, like 1/r squared, just from purely geometrical considerations. But the solar wind density changes kind of slightly slower, so you see more dense wind outwards than kind of would be expected, I guess. And as far as I'm aware, it's explained by magnetic fields and MHD stuff. But whatever, the most interesting point is that there's this power 1/r to the power of 1.86, and this 86 part is almost the same as he has in his planetary spacing thing, where he has 2 to the power of 0.86. So maybe there is some connection. Maybe the solar wind is directly related to the planetary spacing. That's what I'm saying, basically.
Well, wait a minute, because I mean, I thought in his model and in his talk, the spacing of the planets is related to the Bessel function itself. It's I don't know, not necessarily the zeros of the Bessel function, but where the certain of the zeros, where the slope is going the right direction.
Do you mean Scott's model?
Yeah.
Well,
and Scott
maybe.
was also quoting another gentleman who came across the same results as him by mapping out the planets to the Bessel function. I forgot to write his name down, but I need to cite that.
Yeah, he doesn't claim total originality for his model. It's like he refined it or made it precise or made it exact or something, but Scott gave someone else credit for originating in some sense.
Well, I certainly give him credit for popularizing the Birkeland current model again.
Well, I'm just basically repeating what Michael said, that the Bessel function maxima and minima are equally spaced and planets are not. So if they are related, then in something else should be involved at least.
Yeah, that's a scalar thing that this is the 1/r stuff that I see pretty loudly. It's actually 1/r r to the 1/2 with a constant. We see it pretty loudly here. But this is a good start. This is a good start to the model, though. I mean, it's just to me, it's just take this and then have a you scale the wavelength as as like a 1/r type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, it's kind of I think it might be related to these problems of like dark matter and things like that, where gravity seems to, I mean, whatever the attraction force is, seems to fall off in a different manner, let's say, than 1/r squared. So since solar wind already does that, it doesn't fall off like 1/r squared, but rather slower, then maybe it is related even to the galactic scale processes, something like that.
Mm-hmm. This one image has been playing me. It was on one of Wall's Space News's. But let's see if I can find it here. It's bubbling around. Yeah, this one. With the trans-Neptunian objects. Do you think this is fairly accurate? This little graphic here.
Well, I don't exactly know what it's depicted here. So
yeah, well, it's the objects that we track that are outside of the solar system. The orbits of them. This would be.
Well, maybe.
See it there.
maybe.
Did you see the action that starts happening here? Start.
But what is this Buffy's orbit?
Yeah,
Because
I don't know.
there
Buffy
was
Vampire
there
Slayer.
was
I don't
this there was this Buffy star, right? The one that kind of changes its brightness in some mysterious fashion.
know. Okay.
Do you remember? You probably remember there was this story that, or maybe it's alien megastructure around the star or something, or maybe it was a comet swarm around the star and so on. I think it was called Buffy. I mean, kind of Buffy's star or something like that.
Hmm. I just think there's a lot. There's a lot of. I mean, I haven't spent time. I just ran into it fairly recently, but the Lysage's pattern thing of it, and the. I mean, it'd be interesting to kind of do a little bit of harmonic analysis on that. You know, if in fact this far off the, you know, the plane of the ecliptic, right?
No, I completely screwed that up. It was Tabby star.
Oh, Tabby. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, this was another one. Do you know how accurate this is? I've seen this quoted, but I'm just wondering how tight it is. As far as
Well, I haven't looked into it in detail, but I think it's fairly accurate.
yeah, that relationship seems pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked the actual periods, but I know that such resonance exists. That, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So anyway, buddy, this one seems to have had a lot of play. We've enjoyed that one for sure. Let's see.
Yeah, is that up to 10,000 shares or more?
I don't know. It's really good though, right? Now, that's a meme for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think actually I tagged Electric Universe Biology on there too, so it gets people thinking
Mm-hmm.
when I shared it.
Hey guys, posted
Ramon,
something
how's it
in the
going?
chat.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going pretty well. I'm just recovering. That's why my wife made me stay home.
Oh no, okay, from an
That's all
illness or
Yeah. I had a meeting with a kid from the UK campus, and they're gonna have me come and do the entrepreneur thing. But he was sick. He gave me some kind of campus chest cold. So, anyways,
Oh, no.
in the
Huh.
chat, I posted something that from out of one of my papers, a quote, and not sure if that's where Eugene was going or not, but I'd love to hear his response to this. And I also can put up the papers that Giordano was citing to do with this issue if that's necessary. And then I'm going to mute myself.
now we have to read it. Can you go into a little bit more illustration on what you're talking about here?
Well, let's see.
So he basically says that the geometry should be different or something like that.
Yeah, he was talking about how we're going to account for. Obviously, they keep finding baryons, so I don't know. But I had responded to his paper about looking for neutrino radiation in the early part of the. This is all Big Bang cosmology, obviously. And he and I sort of conversation, and then by the time I got to the seventh paper, this came up again because the whole series is about where's the dark matter. This was something he had emailed me, and I hadn't seen that before. And so I think the most important bit is the
Yep.
by a factor of 400%. And I was really intrigued by his explanation about the volume might have something to do with it. So I didn't know if that would play into factors to what Eugene was talking about. I came in the middle of that conversation, so just thought I'd throw that up there.
The one thing I found kind of compelling that you mentioned, Eugene, was the density. And maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but the density increases as you go out. You're talking about density of a solar wind.
No, it's just it just doesn't decrease as
Doesn't
fast
decrease as fast. Okay.
yeah, as it could be. I mean, if you just consider the sun as just, shooting solar wind particles in all directions kind of uniformly, and they just, continue following that line, it should fall off as 1/r².
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, pretty much again as the energy density of the solar radiation itself.
Right. Right.
Well, the thing is, though, it's not being ejected like an explosion. It's it's following a gradient. It's being just like any current. It's being pulled, not pushed.
Yeah, well, this is kind of exactly what I mean. That there is definitely some other process involved, which impacts solar wind motion in a huge way. And by the way, I mean, even the whole picture that the solar wind is just, like a homogeneous sea of material, it is completely wrong. We know that solar wind is more like just almost like hair of a sun or something, a bunch of relatively tight streams, like in a plasma ball, rather than again some sort of atmosphere or something.
Yeah. We tend to imagine it, or just right off the bat, that it's got a smooth homogeneity to it. But.
Well, I mean, if you take that kind of scale that you can see on these graphs, then yeah, it might be considered homogeneous, maybe. But if you look at how it actually behaves, I mean, no, you should consider the other version.
Right. There's this one thing here that we were looking at. It's pretty cool. A GIF that we ran into. Hopefully, yeah, that this one.
Well, in energetics, which for me personally, is my understanding that energetics has to follow these general electromagnetic principles, but in energetics, pretty much everything is in a pulsation or kind of a increase and decrease and then increase and decrease, but not necessarily the same increase or the same decrease each time, and not necessarily the same length or even the same frequency. And that's kind of what gives a continual renewal of, like, you need weather to be a bit chaotic, because if it's too regular, then somewhere is going without. You need it to be constantly, there's a drought somewhere and there's a flood somewhere, and even some life forms, need, like, obviously famously, many trees need forest fires in order to actually seed, but they don't need a forest fire every year. So that's my understanding as to how the universe in general is going to work on a larger scale or a smaller scale.
That was one of the things. I worked at when I was like 21 years old, but I worked at Yellowstone, and like the one thing that they had started doing was like let the fires burn there in order to keep the ecosystem balanced. They used to go, take them, just, if there's a fire, they would always run at it and clear it and just put it out, But this screwed up the ecosystem actually of Yellowstone, so they stopped doing it. And they would let them burn in some controlled manner.
Exactly. In energetic medicine, if you kind of whatever play God and you kind of hold something back for a long time, there's always some kind of snapback, and it can be a very severe reaction. And of course, the general goal is to try and smooth the movements. But even in the channels, energy comes in pulsation. So there's different times of day, different organs, and different channels are stronger than other ones, which means you're weaker in those other channels, and there's potentially a way to get sick if you're exposed just at the wrong time. So it's a concept that I try to look at all sorts of things, like economics, cultural phenomena, things like what's popular, etc. Mm-hmm. And I try to see the waves that are being presented.
Right.
That's
right.
Yeah. That's again this syncretist idea. Not everybody gets into syncretism, so.
The one that keeps ringing bells for me is this it's a little exotic, but this Dirac impulse thing. You kind of see something happening here where there's an energetic, kind of pop, this.
Oh, you mean the Dirac delta?
Yeah.
Like yeah, that's a important.
But like any time function, those things pop out, kind of, and obviously, it's this. I hate using the word obviously. Sorry, the frequency, just tightening, and then all of a sudden you have that spike, this sine x over x thing. So I worked in cardiology for a while, and the nature of that heartbeat is pretty compelling.
Yeah. Whoa.
What was
You may. I have no idea. You may find it interesting that in Chinese medicine that there are a number of substances that are not in Western medicine. So obviously we have blood and fluid and all that, but we also have a vital substance called pulse, and the pulse is of course related to the flow, but it's not only related to that, and it's something that you generate in your heart, and it needs to propagate throughout the body, and it can become reversed, and it can move around, it can become displaced actually, and even rise up into the head. And it is related to a different signal or substance that comes from what's called the dantian, which is in the belly, in the just below the navel.
Okay.
And which I'm calling that one signal because I think we need a Western name for it.
Dantian.
Yeah, the dantian literally means an elixir field. So
Wow.
it's like a special pill field. So this concept, of course, they mean it literally is a field, but it's interesting how the word ends up playing out. So this signal, when it rises up and sits where the heart is, the pulse, as a response, rises up and actually sits in the throat or even higher up into the head. And this is very unhealthy. And not only does it lead to thyroid problems, but it can lead to migraines and sensory problems, right? You can have a loss of function in the eyes, the ears. And I have been noting this when you're moving pulse back down to the chest, you can actually watch it go down the neck. There will be extra throbbing in the carotid area and even in the SCM muscles. You have to actually needle those muscles to let them soften so that this energy will go down. And then I teach my patients to swallow the pulse back down into the heart. And you need it to settle right down by the xiphoid process. If you don't get all the way down, if you get stuck in the thymus, it'll just rise back up the next day when they get stressed out again. So it's definitely related to the fight or flight.
It's about anxiety. Anxiety causes
it. Now, the physical pulse obviously still remains. But over a long period of time, if the substance my is either lost, displaced, the physical pulses will become interrupted, and there will be a problem either between the left and right, especially or between more likely the atria and the ventricle. And what you'll get is what we call the coming and going pulse. Sometimes we'll get a chopping, be indicative of thick blood. There can also be something called the drum skin pulse, which is a defense response. Body actually hardens up as a protection mechanism, and you get the feeling like there's a tight drum skin over top of the pulse.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So how do you monitor like the location of it? I mean, you're saying is it
these days? So in the ancient days, they used all the 9 classic pulses. Anymore, these days we just use the radial pulse is generally what's used. You can still, of course, use the pedal pulse and all the other pulses, okay? But we typically only use the radial pulse.
Mm-hmm.
There's about 30 different pulse descriptions. And, of course, rate is important, but To be honest with you, Chinese medicine is so strict. If your rate isn't exactly 60, you got a problem anyhow. So
Right.
that's not enough information in Chinese medicine.
Mm-hmm.
We're interested in what's called the quality of the pulse. And from an energy standpoint, actually, you can feel it come out of the pulse and enter your body, and that's how you can get more information. That's the secret as how these pulse masters, which are still around, there are people who can do this, and they can tell when you've had an injury, at what age, etc. And that's because they're actually getting information from your body through what are called mirror neurons. They're having an empathetic moment, and there's some type of information that's exchanged, but we don't know exactly how. But I can tell you that you do feel it go through your fingertips and into your body, and sometimes you get really interesting information from that, which sometimes scares the crap out of my patients. I'll be honest with you. They get a little bit. They get really weirded out when I am figuring out things, especially when they try to hide things. Like if they're smoking weed, and then they haven't told me. Things like that.
Okay. What impact does that have?
What stuff they haven't told me?
Or just smoking weed in general, since you brought it up.
Oh, from an herbal standpoint, marijuana creates a lot of phlegm and heat.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a middling herb. It's not a superior herb.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not without cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any herb or substance, it could be a refined substance too, like Tylenol or whatever, acetaminophen. Anything that you take, its grade depends on how much you get versus how much it costs you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, ginseng is not a superior herb. Ginseng is a middling herb because it does over time raise your blood pressure. Ginger is a superior herb though, because you can cook it, use it in all sorts of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just got some of that actually.
But the pulse. Back to the subject of the pulse. I wrote a whole blog article about it, and I was using my meridian circuit as a model because I really think that we have got to figure out what these energy sources are. I think that they have a lot to say about how things go in our life, because there are repetitious references in like yoga and Taoism and Buddhism and even in Christianity all over to the heart and how either the soul or the original mind, the face, the golden flower, all these things resting in the heart. And so I really think that this electric-like signal might be more important than we're giving thought to on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. We look at it very mechanistically, and I think that's a big problem. I mean, that was one of the reasons I got out of the business, because it just seemed too materialistic to the extreme. It's like this thing's just an interesting mechanism that just by keeping flow. Like, I mean, one of the main things you do for arrhythmia is you take here's pulmonary ostia, right? And there are errant signals that can come in here and screw up in the left atrium. So what they do is with this catheter, they do an ablation. It's basically a cauterization of this ostia, and it blocks the signals from coming in, and then quote unquote solves the arrhythmia, right? This is a very expensive procedure, but it's commonly done, and it's like that's to me that's just brutally primitive and like mechanistic, a mess.
Well,
and the solve is like, they get like 60-70% on it, and it's okay. You're
right.
You're fixing something, but I think it seems to me you're causing more damage than anything.
That's because. And this is a thing I try to emphasize, especially with my athlete patients that come in, the energetics determine how the mechanism works, right? But then the mechanical body is what keeps alive. It keeps creating the energetic body. There's a common misconception that the chakras are the glands, and that's not true. The glands are the fruit of the chakra. but the functioning of the nerves and glands together and their rhythmic behavior nourishes the tree of life. So there's a cyclical, there's a reciprocal effect between the energetic and the mechanical. So take something like laminectomies. It's a mechanical solution to what seems like a totally mechanical problem. However, it seems like almost 100% of the time, within a few years, the person is back to the same problem. Now, could it be that their back has continued to collapse? It's totally possible. But from our perspective, it's a continuation of the improper signal. And the improper signal continues to stagnates these circuits. That's the basis of my hypothesis surrounding how meridians are really working. Is you have this circuit as an input and an output, and if the signal, if the reverse signal or the end voltage on the right, the pressure from the left, then the channel is not going to propagate. And I think that would go a long ways to explaining some things don't work out, whereas other times, of course, the mechanical solution is going to be perfectly fine. Chiropractic is going to be fine. Muscle resetting, cupping, those are going to be perfectly fine unless you don't get rid of the signal. If the signal remains, if the nerves keep pumping out that signal, of course they're going to still feel pain, or of course they're still going to have a continuation of, like, say, an autoimmune condition. Anyways, not trying to get us off on the side topic.
No,
but
it's cool. I mean, it's to me, there's a message coming through that there's a fairly significant connection going on between these seemingly disparate, topics. So.
Yeah, they seem disparate, but the electric universe is bringing them together, really.
Right.
Because we can start to use electrical. This is the hypothesis of that I've presented, is we can use circuit modeling in order to simulate. Of course, if you cut a person open, you're not going to find an inductor and a transformer. You're certainly not going to find one in a tiny microscopic point. But they've measured these values. They've measured inductance and impedance in the tissues. So we might be capable of producing very complex models. And of course, because my circuit's an analog circuit, that would make it very, very difficult. We have to find a way to digitize it just for the sake of, the computing power, right? Otherwise, you'd need a SETI-like network to analyze a single person. But
isn't that whole approach also kind of too mechanistical? I mean, to represent a human body as an electric circuit, which is a kind of a completely different thing in the first place.
Yeah.
You just basically make such an extreme reductionism in some sense.
Yes, but that's why it's only a simulation, right? You also still have to have the imaging, right? You have to do thermography, and you have to look at all the signals coming out of the body. You can't only use the circuit model. The goal is just like AlphaGo, it's trying to anticipate the opponent. In this case, you would be trying to anticipate if I have a sprained ankle, how would that propagate? Because there is strong research, for example, that injuries to the outside of the foot lead later on to conditions such as Parkinson's. There's a whole book of research on that. There's a 300-page book. And I've gone around at my boxing club and asked these Parkinson's guys, and a huge number of them have foot injuries in their past, in their childhood usually. So how can we anticipate the propagation of the signal? And it can be really, really important. I had a case, this is kind of a sad case. I failed at this one. So this patient had bad acupuncture at a competitor, not a local competitor, but in my state though. This person had done what he thought was classical needling, which meant thick and deep and very hard. But he had mislocated the point, and he had reversed the direction in how we needle, so you should be normally doing it perpendicularly. And he had done it obliquely. The man went into a spasmodic state, and he sweat for about an hour in a fetal position, and he was left in a cold room, which is also really important. Now, what happened is afterwards he developed a sore in the spot. It looked like a diabetic weeping ulcer. It could not be, like antibiotics, everything that was tried could not stop this thing. By the time I got the energy signal going the positive direction, he ran out of money, went back to work, and was wearing construction boots, and it just got worse. He eventually did end up being amputated.
Oh.
Now, in the Chinese, and I know, it's dangerous. In the Chinese medicine, though, by the time I figured out what's going on there, the reversive flow, that signal can continue even without the foot there, and can continue up the leg. Of course, you hope to. Of course, all the gangrene and stuff would all be gone, but the actual signal would continue propagating. Was removed, and it does. You feel it leave when you have a like, I guess you would call it a little ball of negative energy. You feel it when it leaves, and I instruct people in that all the time. This is a little bit more sinister because he'd had treatment from this other person. And before he came to see me with this weeping wound, and we call that a yin ulcer. So it's not, you can't treat it with antibiotics.
Is there reflexology to having to do with the tops of the foot too?
Yeah, there's pretty much you can create reflexology and homunculuses throughout the entire body because of all the dermatomes. Because dermatomes give you reflective ability throughout the body.
I'm laughing because I love your knowledge about this. All these words I have never heard of. I love it.
A dermatome.
A dermatome is a nerve innervation of the skin, and a myotome is a nerve innervation of the muscle.
Nice. Okay.
Oh, all right.
Wow. So to go back to what you were saying earlier, is the simulation of a human and an electrical impulse. I love the idea, but like sort of like with what Eugene said, it's I know you batted away the idea of it being reductionist, and maybe this could go along with what you're talking about, but the heart and the flow of the heart and the blood and the cycling of the blood, does that produce different currents? And like you were talking about earlier, the pulse of the body, is that like energy induced, or like, I mean?
Yeah, so these are really good questions. So first of all, I don't want to bat anything away. I'll tell you this. My paper is based on a previous electrical engineer's paper who's in Taiwan, and he introduced something called chaotic wave theory, and he said that he was using a fractal continuum. Now, my problem with his model, he had a really interesting Y circuit for his model, is that it's totally passive. There's no active sensory, right? And we can't just follow the physiology. We need to follow the pathophysiology of both Chinese and Western science. They have to be covered. So my model is a fractal model, but it is, the circuit represents the point and the whole channel, and or the whole continuum of all the channels, which all link together. So you can use it on all the different levels. So the values for each of the components will have to change depending on the scale that you're looking at. So if you're looking at an individual point or an individual cell or an entire, like say the IT band, you're going to have to find the different values for those. So it's not so simple to reduce anything at all. And like it would need probably, to get any reasonable simulation going, is probably on the order of 100 million of these analog circuits running through a simulation simultaneously. Of course, we're beginning with the Chinese medicine. They reduce it to 12 channels, roughly 1,000 points, not counting the reflexology points of the ear and scalp, and a few correspondences. Now, there's other rules too, and that's what you're alluding to.
Buddy, yeah, you just went blank for a little bit there. Maybe.
My back, yeah.
There, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. The chi moves, warms, and regulates the blood, and blood is the mother of chi. So there's a reciprocal relationship between them in which the hydrodynamic flow is going to be influenced by the way the nerves cause vasoconstriction or vasodilation or increased cardio output. And of course, that's related to the hormones too. And the flow of that is definitely related to the circulation of qi. So when I see people and their hands look like they're becoming arthritic, almost always there's a circulation of blood problem and a circulation of qi problem. They're both going hand in hand, no pun intended.
But could you? I mean, since you're so in depth of this, could you give like kind of like maybe a 50,000-foot view of like the history and like of the known history of acupuncture and like from whence it came and yeah.
The known history is that the oldest book we have, the author is
Oh, now you're back. Yeah, they only last for about a second and a half or so.
The author is who is talking to the Yellow Emperor, who we are speculating, of course, was Saturn. So not a real king, but it's still given format. Now that book is 2,600 years old. In that book, Chibo laments that the art of the ancients has already been lost. Going back to maybe the Shang dynasty, possibly the Xia, but it doesn't seem possible to many. But they did find a needle in somewhere in Eurasia that was 20-some thousand years old that was not used for sewing. So we don't know.
Okay.
Now in India, they have their a channel-based medicine as well. It's a completely sister medicine. And India, of course, maintains that their medicine is at least 10,000 years old, if you want to believe it. There's a documentary used to be on Netflix at least, it might be on YouTube, called Ayurveda, Science of Life. And in it, you can watch a man paralyze a goat with a pressure point, and then he unparalyzes the goat.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, and there's a documentary that I do encourage people to watch called 9,000 Needles, in which a man from my state, who was Mr. Kentucky, and he had two brothers who were also they were bodybuilders. But the man from Kentucky, he had basically a stroke. I mean, it was an aneurysm, but it was related to his using steroids. And you watch him go to China, and he walks out of that hospital, not without assistance, but he had already had the condition for many months before he actually went. And that documentary is totally on YouTube. It's called 9,000 Needles.
Needles. Oh, okay.
9,000 Needles. The entire documentary is available. At last I saw on YouTube.
Okay.
And I've heard he may have died since the making of that documentary, but it's a very remarkable documentary. At any rate, he was getting acupuncture though 2 times a day, plus PT, plus massages and herbs. I mean, it wasn't a small amount. And they got a good deal. I mean, it was like $20,000. It's a very touching documentary.
Okay.
So those 2 documentaries I definitely could recommend to people who are interested in how this energy flow may be proven or discovered. There are some really wild energy stuff out there. Some of it's more reliable than others in terms of no touch work and use of things that are like Reiki but superior. All of it we don't really know how it works, but if channels really are transceivers, signals, circuits, right, where they're able to, on some level, maybe the DNA, we don't know, receive and put out energy signals, and that these can be modeled. Maybe that's a way that we can start explaining it. That I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's tied. It seems like it's tied to spooky action at a distance.
It might be. That's one of my speculations, but I'm not averse to talking about some type of different electromagnetic wave or something else. I have not. Then, yeah, go ahead.
And then it also reminds me of the nocebo and the placebo effects, because both of them work very well. And if you're in dire need and you're on a phone call and it's your last resort and you're calling Ingo Swann, cure you with his mental powers and his chi from the other side of the world, you're going to believe that it's going to happen, and then you could get cured. I mean, you might not believe, but whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, there's a soft scientific explanation for that without even going into the possibility of entanglement. But essentially, the body having these reserves of these vital substances, one of them being essence, that even a person who is near to dead, especially in cases where the disease and it doesn't involve a severe degeneration but is more sudden, cancer patient, right? A lot of times the person is dying because of the disruption of proper physiological function in the body, not because they are out of reserve.
Back.
Especially like HIV, right? In AIDS, usually there's addiction, but not in every case. And so if there's a reserve of life force in the person, and the mind having general over, as we've studied monks in the snow, or controlling their digestive system, controlling their sexual functions, etc., it may be possible for people under the right influence, whether it's hypnosis or a placebo or suggestion or whatever, or prayer, for them to generate the proper signal to access that energy source, and then of course promote proper metabolic function and regeneration of cells.
So it points to mind again, mind over matter again.
Yes, the Taoists say that the mind is the essential. So everything surrounding the mind, and then how it all interplays is a nonlinear interaction. We don't know. Sometimes it seems like karma is more important. Sometimes it seems like fate. Sometimes it seems like chaos. It just depends on. And then there's always that little bit of luck, and mankind we've not done any better. There's a whole panel of quantum physicists arguing as to which of their solutions is correct. And all of them apparently are correct, but they're completely different in their mechanism. That's a fun panel.
Right. Well,
like a 2 hour.
Well, right. I mean, the need to have one solution. This is problematic, I would say.
I think that was a Brian Greene panel. I don't know if did anybody see, you know what I'm talking about, where he has the four physicists, one's presenting cubism, and anyways, it all boiled down. I was like, well, that one's luck, that one's chaos, and that one's fate. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that?
No.
It's a pretty good panel. It was a few years ago. I think it was like 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, each one is convinced that their model is more correct, and they understand the other physicists have good models as well, but they're there to present their argument. And then what I really loved was the guy who was presenting cubism was a total. He was different, let's just say.
Okay.
He was fun.
Cubism as a basic model of physics.
Well, with a Q. So this is probably where
Q-ism.
Yeah, where Eugene like chaos to me, to be honest with you. It was it was a strange model, but mathematically, supposedly, it works.
Have you heard of that, Eugene?
Not entirely, only the end of it.
Okay. Q-ism? I'm curious now. These are flow of consciousness things, so it makes it kind of fun. So I consider it play here, but Q-ism? How would I look that up?
What I'm just going to do, I'm going to see if I can find that exact panel, because I think that people will like it, because it was really weird. Hours long, so on your own. It was pretty weird.
So, Shifu, you were saying that basically what I hear is this model that you're working on involves there's nodes and filaments, and the filaments and the nodes are both part of the same.
Right, they're a fractal.
Yes.
Yes.
I think that's how it ultimately has to be broken down, as far as what we've been shown as science, into a filament and node type of structure. The more we learn, the more we see that nature is mirroring that type of system, that flow symmetry, or asymmetry, however it branches. But Yeah, that's how I see it too. And going back to how everything connects, our minds connect, minds and healing pathways and prayer and all of these different things. Our three brains, our heart, our brain, and our gut working in combination together. Um, uh, I'd say it's necessary to have all three of them. Like the gut is just as necessary as the heart, is just as necessary as the brain. And I don't know where I'm
Right.
going with that. But
Well, you can actually, using the Fibonacci, you can divide the entire thing up into 2, the 3, the 5, or the 8. Or you can, again, use 13 if you like to use the channels. Technically, according to that could get it into the thousands.
yeah, you should be able to go through channels that are, the way I see it, they're nested and they're in some sort of like umbilical type of manner and wombs. And all of these filaments are wombed or entombed or wrapped around each other in what Vladimir Ginsburg refers to as the helicula, and these helices within helices. And there has to be a parameter for the outside, the epidermis of these Birkeland currents. You know, you have the dermal layers, the interior layers, and then you have the epidermis, and ultimately there is an outside shape to everything. So fusing the outside with the inner, I'm curious about the dynamics of how the filaments braid and entangle from one thought healing one person to one thought being received and actually being healed, the healer and the healed, you know. I guess I'm talking about
Yeah,
astral lines.
Yeah. Have you
Nice,
seen?
nice chirping.
Yeah, the chirping was good.
In the
Yeah.
background.
Yeah, that is really nice. Have you seen the Krillian photography where they did? They had when a man and a woman are in love and they put their hand on, and then versus a man is interested in the woman but she's not interested in him. Have you seen that? Those Krillian photographs?
Not those particularly, but I
Yeah,
have
well,
other
it's-
ideas.
Well, it's really interesting
Experience
because, and
those.
again, it needs to be verified because these people could be selling something or whatever. However, in the photographs, in the male and the woman and the man are in love, the lines go right together, just as beautiful as mitosis. And then when the man is interested in the woman, the lines go towards her hand, but her lines go away from his lines, and then his become turbulent and kind of buckle off. So again, that's something felt in the heart, love, and sensed in the mind, and yet is showing up potentially. Right, it's all allegedly, but it's. I believe the research. I just need to do it myself at some point on these electrified plates during Krillian photography. I found that to be really compelling and potentially true. I'm more skeptical on that than some other researches that are really cool, like the water bridge, and the experiment that Eugene has mentioned. I have a lot more hope in those experiments, but the Krillian one fascinates me because it feels intuitively true, and then there's some objective demonstration that's been provided.
Well, also there's quite a bit of I think it was probably a decade ago, I ran across these papers that were talking about these doctors all around the world that were showing proof of a human energy field. And when an enlightened person or a healer entered the room, the amount of lumens in the room actually goes up.
Yes, that has a name.
And when someone who's not enlightened, just like an average Joe Schmo or whatever, goes in the room, nothing happens.
Correct. That is actually it referred
there's
to.
this. Okay.
Go ahead, Eugene. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention this Pauli effect. Maybe you heard about that. You know that Wolfgang Pauli was interested in some esoteric stuff like psychoanalysis and archetypes and these types of things. But he also was one of the main figures in quantum mechanics. There's this interesting thing called Pauli effect. So somebody noticed that whenever Pauli appeared in the lab, some equipment started malfunctioning.
Right.
And it kept happening over and over. And actually, there's sort of an anecdote about that once the head of the laboratory noticed that kind of everything started malfunctioning, but Pauli wasn't around, but he kind of sent notes to other people to know whether Pauli was somewhere near, and they said, "Oh yeah, he was in town at that day, when your labs broke down." Yeah.
I definitely think that it's more than a little possible. Now the subject of the lighting in the room, that is referenced in that Yellow Emperor's Inner Classic 2,600 years ago. It's called Tongshen Ming, and Ming means brightness. It means a light that comes out of the chest, and it also has a double meaning for your destiny.
M-I-N-G.
Well, it's already been proven that we emit biophotons. I think not only out of our eyes, but other places, right? All right.
Yeah, no, I agree. There is a light. We just call that spirit in the medicine, but it's not the spirit. It's just like your affect, and it shows up in the eyes. And when people walk in and there's not enough light coming out of their eyes, that's the first thing I have to treat. Because there will be no improvement in their knee or their neck or whatever else, so long as they have their bioluminescence is blocked.
How do you tell? You just observe.
Oh, you could see it on them. You could.
Yeah.
I could teach you within a half an hour. You could start spotting red shadow, green shadow, black shadow. You could start spotting hollowness, sadness, depression. You could spot all of it really, really simply.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about Robin Williams long before everybody else. I mean, I was reading it on him for a long time.
Huh. Okay.
What he was going through was so internally painful. It's amazing to me that he lasted this long.
Right.
But it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad that these people, as rich as they are and as loved as they are, still can't get the kind of help. There's a woman in India who had the most amazing voice, but she must have sung at the wrong time, wrong season or something, and dryness, the dry wave entered in her throat. She can't even cry. She can't laugh. She can't talk at a normal voice. It hurts so bad. Mm-hmm. And she's tried everything, but without any people practicing the ancient medicine where energy is displaced, we're talking biblical age kind of medicine, she can't be cured. And now it's been in her throat. There's probably going to be scarring on her vocal cords. She'll never, even if you got it out of there and she could speak normal, she'll never sound like she used to. And her voice was just unreal. She was the Madonna of India.
Wow. Wow. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sheila Chandra, and she literally can't sing or talk anymore.
Huh.
I mean, she whispers if she can do anything.
Right. It's a shame.
The scarification, yeah, it's really it's terrible, and it can happen to anyone. People can have weird things, and again, this signal propagation I mentioned in my paper. I had a patient who came in and she had a shingles reaction, but not to somebody having chickenpox. She got stung by a wasp. Now, when she got stung by the wasp in the back, we treated the dermatomes of the back. And then about 4 or 5 sessions in, I started walking into the room. It smelled like suntan lotion. And come to find out, she had been overloading her body with suntan lotion for years and years. And so she was sweating out suntan lotion. And the room was so thick with suntan lotion, it made me gag.
Right.
And so the toxicity of the lotion blocking the normal physiology, but as soon as, because we had already cupped the wasp wound and all the poison had been pulled, all that was left was her body's negative reaction now, because the positive energy and the negative energy do not get along. And so if you try to restore the positive energy, you want everything. And now she had to sweat out all those years of toxin. And she just loved to sunbathe.
Makes me want to go to the sauna.
Well, too much can be bad too, but sweating is generally a good thing.
Right.
I cannot find this panel. I'm finding lots of panels, But I can't find this one with Brian Greene and these 4 quantum physicists. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
If you type quantum panel and Brian Greene
Yeah, yeah,
on
okay,
YouTube,
okay.
phone book,
Yeah, yeah.
you get the phone book. I'll tell you
Okay,
that.
okay.
A lot of Isaac Asimov. Yeah, if I ever find it, I'll put it in the EU chat. But these signals, again, whatever they are, we don't really quite know. I suspect that they're not strictly action potentials going down nerve channels. I think that there is a lot more going on, but we just don't have any other. We just don't know. We're gonna have to do.
Well, we don't even.
Go ahead.
We don't even know how it works in our body, nonetheless, how it works outside of our bodies with our bioplasmas.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's all sorts of interactions that are going on all the time. I think that we probably take for granted how many sensory inputs that we're having at any one time. If it weren't for the reticular formation, none of us would be capable of handling anything, right? Because
That's
it
fight or flight
literally
right there, right?
the reticular formation literally blocks 99+% of your sensations, so you're not screaming in pain all the time.
Oh, so that's the sensory editing happens in the reticular formation. Isn't that a cone shape too?
I do not remember. I'd have to look at the anatomical chart. I don't want to be quoted.
There it is.
Right
In the
here.
center, it's really important. It's in between your lower central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. So it's a really important structure.
Guess what? I just found out about that on my friend composed a documentary, Chad Seymour Morris, and I shared it with the group. I don't know if anybody took some time to look at it, but there's wonderful things. And one of the things that I found inside of it is that when the heart beats, the reticular formation beats with it in your brain. And David, possibly you could pull up a video of the heartbeat in the brain. You could actually see it. It's liquid. So the power of this pulse wave that you were talking about earlier at the beginning of this episode makes me think about that. The pulsation is right there inside your brain and your heart where they meet.
Yeah, I certainly do think that it can be invaded, what we call displaced energy sources. So where this kind of, again, it can be anywhere from a nut-sized signal to I've seen negative signals in people as big as footballs, but most commonly baseball to softball sized. They can rise up and move throughout the body. The most common way that people feel these signals move about is when they feel a negative one go down the leg, back or hip treatment, but it could be a leg treatment, and they'll feel like they're having a Charlie horse moving, feel it going down, and if they do a really good job, they'll feel it go out the bottom of the foot, and it feels like a ball leaving the bottom of your foot.
Wow.
It's a lot of fun, but they don't really, because everybody expects that they're coming in for a spa thing, and here they are, they're getting Charlie horses and stuff. Oh well. It's not a popularity thing. If they want to transform.
That's really cool. Yeah. I've seen that before. Just for it's worth another look.
And it
They
and it could
amplify the
be
movement here. Yeah.
yeah, that's beautiful.
What's causing it?
Well, I mean,
The
all of your nerves,
God.
they're not capable of wiggling, then you have a major problem. If they wiggle too much, it's probably an indicator that you have this extra energy source and it needs to be actually excreted. I have a terrible name for it too. When it comes out, and you could feel it in the room because it smells. Okay, guys, when you walk in the room and a person has
okay.
this out, even if it's not cigarette
Like a
smoke,
brain
people-
fart.
It's nasty. I mean, whether it's from excessive sleep or it's from sugar, they have some kind of internal chemistry problem, or again, like a suntan lotion, or they've been over applying shampoo or something. I just call it all ejectum because
Ejectum,
it's an
okay.
unpleasant ejectum, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's something in the room. The air is thicker, It can make you toss.
Can you tell us your process? Are you doing meditation? Is it a steamed room? I mean, I'm trying
No,
to
it's
envision this here.
It's acupuncture. I leave. I leave the room. I don't want to sit there while they're doing it. And plus, it interferes. Once I put the needles in and I instruct them how to breathe, I leave. Now, sometimes they'll think that I was in there, and that's all, the spirit work, etc. But most of the time, they just sit there and they'll have an internal experience. And some of them will have profound experiences. They might see animals, or they might see colors, or hear things, or memories, or they'll tremble and shake, or they'll have electric lightning. They'll have cold, heat, whatever.
Are you sensitive? Are you sensitive to smell?
Not usually. If it's a bad chemical, because I'm a lung type, it can do me. But I don't usually have a problem with perfumes or anything.
Okay.
There was one time my wife
curious.
sprayed something that gave me instant bronchitis, but other than that, no.
Well, I was just curious because a lot of people who are, deal with energy work and stuff like that are empaths, or not necessarily have to be an empath, but are experiencing heightened senses and the heightened sense of smell and stuff.
Yeah, no, I don't have
I'm
synesthesia.
wondering if it's just because they smelled.
No, I don't have synesthesia, and it's not a normal smell. What I'm talking about, but anybody can smell it. By the time it gets out of the body, anyone can walk in and smell it. If the person smells like they've been working in a horse stable, they obviously do, but they wore new clothes today, and they walk in, and you don't smell horses on them, and then they lay, and then they eject this smell, and they smell like a horse stable. It's obvious that they've been imprinted by this odor and their work. And sometimes it is also true that they are mostly stressed out because of their work, and they may love horses but hate the work. That happens.
Yeah.
That happens a lot. I get a lot of because I'm in Kentucky. I get a lot of people that are in pain because the work has stressed them out.
Well, another weird thing is apparently I've been studying the sense of smell the past week, and some of the stuff I've learned is that it's like a lock and key mechanism. That it's actually a shape. What we're smelling is shapes.
Oh.
And they fit inside of our nose receptacles as certain shapes. But then they went deeper into the study and found out that it's not always like that, because cyanide smells like almonds, and one of them will kill you and one of them's fine,
Yeah.
But like that makes me wonder if that sense of smell, like coming in your lungs, like you're gonna generally smell like the situation that you're around in a way that makes a lot of sense.
Well, as far as I know, the best guess at the moment, although I'm not sure if it's an accepted theory in physiological world, but at least I believe this is true, that basically what nose detects is, again, not really the shapes, because similar shapes might produce completely different smell, but it's the actual electromagnetic spectrum of the vibrations of the molecule, that is, rotational, vibrational spectrum of the atoms in the molecule that you're smelling. That's what determines the smell. So basically, quantum chemistry of this molecule.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
it seems like in the nose there's some sort of spectral analyzer, and it's electromagnetic. It's not, something else.
It's probably hairs, right? Because usually with most of our senses, it comes down to cilia or rods and cones. It's weird how necessary hair is. Like in our ears, it all comes down to hair. I would assume it probably comes down to something along the lines of hair in our nose, in our olfactory there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, the shape of the cochlea and everything, and then the wide range of frequencies that it has, and then the eyes are limited pretty much to an octave, and I'm wondering if you could do the same kind of just the perspective on this. I wonder what that notch is that it is open to.
I'd like to bring forth that this is Ignacio. Sorry, hi
Hey.
guys.
How's it going?
A bit sick, but to the point. Mystics report that there are corollary senses in the spiritual world to all our physical senses, so that there are spiritual olfactory and sight and sound and tactile stuff that happens directly into consciousness, and that maybe, I've had this experience because I have a very weak sense of smell. Sometimes I am having an olfactory experience, and sometimes I cannot. And I've come to the conclusion that I'm experiencing some spiritual sensation of smell, and most of the time I don't have the little receptors to pick it up. Over.
That reminds me of a lot of when a spiritual event happens, people say that there is a smoky smell in the air, or a sweet smell when an angel visits, or other things like that.
Right, and what we have is not the ability to distinguish between a physical vibration, an etheric energy, which could be very much electrical, and an astral influence, which is definitely consciousness to consciousness world. And the mystics report that the scent of flowers and associated with spiritual beings is an astral experience, whereas something related to acupuncture would be something more etheric. At least that's the theory.
So I could speak from the. Go ahead. Is that Heather?
Hey.
Hey.
Heather.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't mean to be weird or just to throw this out there, but I mean, sometimes when people are about to have a stroke, they smell something burning. So I understand the sensory perception to varying degrees, whether it be a physical or just a mental brain action, responding to some sort of stimuli. Doesn't necessarily, there are the variety of events that would cause this, some being physical, some being spiritual. The physical sense is if you are having some sort of a reaction that you are, like a smell that you are unaware of, there might be some sort of underlying physical thing that's causing that might warrant investigation. Sometimes it is a spiritual experience, but sometimes it's definitely a very physical response to something not going quite right in your system.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on that and verify that what she's saying is very accurate. What Ignacio said is very accurate, because so the way that they look at the actual Eastern science is using the Fibonacci, each of the Fibonacci numbers corresponding to a different chakra level. And so the way that you're going to experience the world is going to be dependent on where your the main bit of your consciousness. This is the entire concept of the mysterious past. It's what is guiding you to move. What is the mover behind the moved, and the real you that is in there being a very small part in a much larger framework of both visible and invisible material. And so this one place of wherever you are, if you have a higher energy state, you're going to be in the upper chakras or energy fields. And if you have a lower state, you're going to be in the lower chakras. One of the greatest indicators of this is if you wake up and you feel more achy and more heavy than you are deeper into your body, both in terms of surface to interior, and also from higher to lower, that you are in your lower chakras. And you're going to tend towards the frequencies associated, from red to yellow or green even. Whereas, and then the way that you filter information is going to be more dependent on how those nerve complexes see that information. And then if you are in a higher state and your mind is, say you're from the throat chakra up, or even heart chakra if you want, but especially the higher, whatever you're high, you're going to take the high road in arguments. You're going to have higher thoughts. You're going to interpret information from that more ethereal. In which case, it is ostensibly very possible for you to start smelling invisible particles from the mystical worldview, from that perspective. That you could, and now, is it just memory of that particle? I don't know. One time I smelled a floor jack from about 200 feet away just by looking at it, and I could smell it as clear as my childhood. But the question is that just because
the memory of the floor
Right.
jack from then?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and did it hit me because I was doing Tai Chi and I just looked over on a deep psychological level?
Right.
know.
Ignacio and I have gone into a little bit, just touching on Rudolf Steiner a little bit, but this super sensible idea, the things beyond our senses, and then being able to tie into them a little bit, and it's really interesting.
And I think that we have a challenge to discern in today's versatile consciousness what is a spiritual physical event and what is a physical spiritual event. I mean, well, that's kind of we should not try to create a separation between the spiritual and the physical. That's why they came up with this idea of metaphysical, in the sense that there is a way in which these, what I would call higher topological dimensions, express themselves in our physiology, and they do so at the molecular and cellular levels, because it's at that scale that high voltage, low amperage events could take place. And whether that's being caused by a, quote, physical particle, or whether it is the precipitation of something from a higher topological dimension at a microscopic scale, that's where the huge problem is of trying to discern what sort of creatures are we? How is consciousness to be studied? How is our physical experience to not be limited by a mathematical, materialistic perspective?
Right.
Yeah, I do. I totally agree, because I feel very strongly that the yin, the taiji, the yin yang is both self-evident and has been proved out. I would challenge anybody to try to disprove it, let's say, and in which case, for everything that's material and visible, there must be a complementary part, and I know that that's going to have, especially the materialist reductionists of physics and chemistry, up in arms. But I would just challenge them to prove that there's anything that isn't has a polar complement. I just haven't found anything. So I personally take it to be a true law of nature, and in which case, and that has huge implications. That there is a whole side of us that can be seen.
Can I ask a couple questions here?
Yeah.
Two questions. One is, okay, well, maybe it's not a question or like a statement or wondering, is that like my understanding of the term metaphysics just meant outside of physics. So it doesn't necessarily insinuate that it is above anything. It's just outside of it. And in that same respect, the idea that if you're vibrating at a lower frequency, that it's going to be centered in your lower chakras is kind of also a misnomer, because you can raise the vibration of your base chakra, which I recommend everyone try. So I'm having a hard time with the whole polarity thing. Of course, that makes perfect sense, and everything does seem to react within that spectrum within itself. That's basic hermetics. But to say specifically like this you're suffering from a lower vibration because it's sitting below your heart chakra is kind of adding like a denotation to your gut chakra, your solar plexus, your sacral chakra. I mean, all of these things can resonate at a very, very high frequency, and your crown chakra can be polluted and negative and going at a very low frequency. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm having a hard time understanding like how you're describing the metabolism of these frequencies in an association with chakras. I feel like that's like giving those chakras a bad vibe or a bad kind of denotation. A disservice to your lower chakras, quote, lower chakras.
That's a fair critique. Bear in mind, when you talk about the average state of things, that doesn't take into account the fractal nature of them, or the spectrum, or the fact that you could take any correspondence and you can flip it on its head. So you can actually reverse all of the 5 elements, and they can go the other direction, so that Earth creates fire instead of fire creating Earth. You can do all that. That's kind of an advanced discussion.
Well, it reminds me, if you can do horrific deeds in your when you're in your higher chakras.
Oh, absolutely.
Just as you can do horrific deeds in your lower chakras.
Absolutely.
And I think of creating a spectrum out of it could create more proxy than we need.
Well, the reason it's useful is just so that people start realizing, because sometimes one person might be on another floor and they're trying to say the same thing, but one person's talking out of their yin yang and the other person's talking out of their heaven man earth. And they're trying to meet, but they're having trouble matching frequency because merely they're seeing through a different filter. It's not that either person's necessarily wrong. I mean, if they're factually wrong, they're factually wrong. But it may be simply that they are today not having the same basic average experience. They're having, and it could be that one of them's going in a forward flow and one of them's going in a reverse flow, and that happens too. And that can happen between family members and all sorts of situations that create tension that doesn't need to be there. It happens all the time. I do have an example of the fractal thing just before in the Buddhist alchemy, there's something called the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. And suffice it to say, there's 10 worlds, and then there's 10 worlds within those worlds. And the Buddhists literally meant that even in hell, in the hell state, or the animal state, or the lustful state, that you can have the state of the Buddhas in that frequency, and that it is only a moment's flip away. And then there was the rest of the times, another 10 times the 3. But the important bit is the 10 times the 10, that there is a fabric of behavior. And we do tend to see things in a linear spectrum, but it is, of course, multidimensional.
Mm-hmm. That you could see things through so many different frames of reference, like your universal body, and you would act like a different person. And then thinking about your experience with your loved ones, your friends, your family, the E-view, but when you're thinking from this universal body or your Godhead or like a larger perspective, it seems that you can see things. It seems like you're not even your body, and you're seeing things larger, and it's allowing you to perceive things and this is how me speaking as a visionary, perspective, I guess. But it reminded me also of something else you mentioned earlier, where all of our sensory input is in our reticular formation, and that's at the base of our brain, right? Is that what you were saying?
I'm not going to say that all of it is, but I'm going to say that according to biomedical science, without the reticular formation, you would be probably unable to live because you would be because of all of the amount of signals that would be coming in.
Right.
So it blocks a lot of signals.
It only made me think, because if the information's coming in our eyes and in our ears, and a lot of the time through our mouth, that's already in our head. Well, at least our eyes are already in our head. It wouldn't make sense to go back down through the spine to come back up through the reticular formation. But I see what you're saying now, as far as if that was severed, we would be severed from the body, from the brain connection.
Yeah, it's important for us to get away from, the front of the head versus the enteral. All of the nervous systems are acting, and they're both acting for themselves, and they're acting in cooperation. And especially if you're healthy, then they're acting in cooperation. And the interaction between them is really complex. And again, probably fractal. There is solid research, if people want to watch Strolling Under the Skin, where they actually scope the fascia, and you can watch the fascia deform nonlinearly. And it does have to be wet, just like the Chinese predicted. And that's the largest organ of the body, bar none. Is that
fascia, interstitial that was just found?
It is interstitial tissue, but it's any kind of really connective tissue, which means it's also the tissues inside the cell. All the fibrinogens, they're all interacting under the influence of the same organic principle,
collagen.
or whatever. Yeah, it's a collagen principle, but there's something.
It's a trihelical.
Yes. And so this goes to demonstrate again that the wood phase, for example, is not only the liver and gallbladder or the sympathetic nervous system, but it is in everything, because the wood phase of energy is this fibrotic filamentary structuring, and it goes everywhere. I think that so you can watch the stretching. The idea that we have that our body stretches like a rubber band is totally wrong. And this is a great video.
That looked like a rubber band to me.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the middle of the video where you actually watch a water droplet and you could see the changing of the structure, and they have all the models. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Healthy, right? When it's not healthy, it doesn't look like that.
So pertaining to these extra organelle outside of our bodies, is there a bunch of names for them, for these channels, these conduits? Like when you're astral projecting, is there different names for, I guess, part of the tissue of the exercise itself? I don't know any of this.
Oh yeah, I mean it's all going to depend on which culture. If you're learning the most advanced psychology in the world from the Tibetans, it's going to have different names, of course, than the Kabbalistic and then the Hermetic and the Egyptian. And it's potentially infinite. There's no way to put a cap on how many of these systems, because the Indian channel system does look different than the Chinese channel system.
So one thing that I've been wondering very hard for at least this past week is, the garb that the ancient Egyptians used to wear, and we know that they used to sun gaze. Is there anyone in the world that put together the same garb that they had, with the same side satchel, a little box, and started staring at the sun? I mean, they had amplifiers on their heads and stuff. It just makes me wonder if anybody's doing this, because I want to try myself.
No idea.
I'd like to mention that it's not all of the systems that we need to understand. It's the appropriate for our time. That these systems, the Hindi and the Egyptian and even the lost Hellenistic systems, evolved in times that were appropriate for the people there. That's why they're different. And that we need to discover what is appropriate for our consciousness and the makeup of our physical bodies. Just like we have uniformalism or uniformitism, when we look back at history, we also keep on thinking that we have the same sort of bodies and the same sort of energetic relationships within those bodies. And that is exactly how our consciousness and our subtle vehicles evolve. They transform. Nature doesn't repeat itself. We really have to concentrate not on replicating.
I see a lot of repetition, but I see a lot of repetition in nature, and I see cyclical. But as far as uniqueness, I would agree. It doesn't repeat. On all scales, it's unique.
Yeah, so we need to pick and choose what we have. From what we have, pick and choose what's most applicable from first principles and experiential knowledge.
I think everything is fractal. I mean, honestly, when people, what's fractal? I'm like, what's not fractal? everything can be broken down to fractals, which is beautiful.
Did you write the solutions on the page? No, you need page when you get your final answers.
Nope, I didn't do that. Sorry, I wasn't writing it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I pressed the mute button.
Make sure it's recursive. Make sure it's recursive.
My son is. So I'm sorry. I better explain. My kids are taking religion and logic, and they struggled on their first exam, and they're both doing logic circuits for extra credit.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he's offering to hand in his solutions, but I told him he needs to write. I hit the mute button, but I guess it had unmuted instead of muted. So
Nans and ands and nors and ors and all those.
Yeah, all that. Yeah, all that fun stuff.
All I hear in the background is a baby, so you better not be forcing that baby to do that type of work. That sounds strenuous.
No, the baby's in the doctoral program, actually.
Yeah. Listen, you guys can laugh now, but you should see my oldest son's presentation of his skyscraper. He engineered a skyscraper that beat the spec of 1,000-to-1 weight ratio.
Wow.
It held my fat butt, and it held.
Oh, he built it too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
he did.
cool.
He designed it in SketchUp, and he designed it in SketchUp, and then we built a test one, and it held 270 pounds and still didn't break.
Wow.
So nice.
Serious. It's not graduate level, but I mean, he does serious work. He reads our paper. He follows Thunderbolts. He does all that stuff.
Cool.
I mean, he reads about. Yeah, he gets a pretty cool education. Nothing like what I got as a kid, you know.
Right. What do you make it out of?
That's like.
I'm sorry.
What do you make it out of?
What do I make?
Material?
Oh, he made those popsicles. It was popsicle sticks and hot glue.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, it was actually pretty strong. Sometime this quarter they'll do the mousetrap, and we'll super engineer it. You know, to be champion level. There's a video on that on. I think it was Mark Rober. Mark Rober has a great video on how to make a champion mousetrap derby car. And
do
it's all physics, right?
Do they have a heart mousetrap?
It's not about the mousetrap, to be honest with you. Okay. You should watch the video. Mark Rober's video is awesome. It's all about kinetics and just class.
Okay.
And little tricks. There's little tips and.
Right,
yeah, I mean, we do all sorts of weird, crazy stuff. Earlier, we were talking for the religions part. We were talking about the origin of the concept of demons, because last week we did the origin of the concept of Satan, which is actually a fairly new concept. The origin of the concept of demons, going all the way back to these catastrophic events. So we were discussing the three possible explanations of demons, and then where those could be intersecting or creating that experience around the world, but everybody's interpreting it differently. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, that's what was going on today.
Okay, that sounds like quite a bit.
I do agree that things don't repeat in the same way. They do go around on a cycle, but there is a kind of a chaotic bent usually. There's something new around the wheel each time, and so yes, I also think that we'll have to create new correspondences. But we shouldn't throw any babies out with the bathwater.
It's been an interesting one that's come in just as far as like kind of like, bits of tension, etc. But the just Jim has brought up before, like you look at the yugas and you look at this very, very long cyclic kind of pattern that you see throughout what we can see of history, and then we're confronted with the catastrophism, the Velikovskian catastrophism, and then the melding of those two, where you can have this catastrophic, seemingly just something absolutely destroyed, but it comes back into a formation that's not necessarily exactly the same, but there is a certain base like resolution to the chaos,
Yeah. It's someone's. I forget where I heard the analogy, or maybe I even read it out of a book about snowflakes. But every single snowflake is different because of the path that it takes through the sky as it falls down, and that's the same with every human and every atom and everything. I believe in molecular uniqueness. That's what I've been shown, and I think personally, but all the way down, because it's the path that it takes, you know. And if it's true that protons can't be destroyed as far as we understand, then my body has, you know, platypus in it, it has horse, it has dinosaurs, it has all these different bodies and all these different memories from all these different creatures. And I could sit here all day long and try to evoke all of these past lives through all of these creatures and get all sorts of substance out of each one of them. But what am I doing ultimately at the end of the day? Obviously exercising muscles that a lot of people don't access on the every day. That's like exercising your heart. Your heart needs to be exercised, and people don't talk about that. And what softens the heart? What softens a hard heart?
Okay.
You gotta cry. You gotta cry. You have to let it out. You have to soften your heart. And I think that I don't know if that's part of what you do, Shifu, to get the light illuminating in people's eyes, but that's what I see. When after a good cry, people get that light back in their eyes, and you know, whether it's a cry out of penitence or repentance or whatever, but they get that.
To answer your latter question, I'm not really doing anything. I'm following both a mixture of my intuition with some, obviously I have formal training. And so there's a little intellect going on, but I try to turn off the scheming mind, the person, and then I leave, and they do the breathing, and their body does the work. They're the real healers. They heal themselves. And how it comes about, that will depend on the vector, and the etiology of the disease. So, for example, I had a woman come in, a strange story. So when she walked in, she was vibrating on the etheric level. To an average person, she just looked solid, but to me, she looked, if you could plunge your finger into her, because she didn't look firm. And so we got into the room, and then she opened up. She had all this that needed to come out. Her son had died from an accidental death touch. And what had happened is he'd gotten in a fight on the high school soccer field, and the kid had punched him in the neck, and he got what's called internal carotid disintegration syndrome. And within 2 weeks, he was dead, because there's in Western medicine, that's an incurable disease. And obviously, she wouldn't have known anyone. She wouldn't have known anybody that could have cured that. And even me, I may not have been able to cure that. He had been punched in the stomach 9, and from there, the bad signal propagated, and he rotted, and it entered his brain, and he died. And her response was to go out and have an affair, and that ruined her marriage.
Run away from it.
I'm sorry.
Run away, escape.
Okay.
Right.
Her escape was to go out and have an affair, and so she was there to receive both healing, forgiveness, to forgive herself, and also to have that energy expressed. So in her case, she did cry, but it wasn't a weeping cry like when I had an assistant, and I needled her in Li4, which treats the head, and she burst into tears immediately because she had been praying for her mother to die, because her mother had Alzheimer's for so long it was ruining her life. And so, you know, that kind of stuff typically results in weeping and bursting of tears. Me, personally, when I do my meditations, if there's tears or drool comes out, I sometimes don't even know what it came from. Sometimes it's some irritation or whatever. It's locked in the cheek or locked in the eye, causing you to create a stress line. And you may not even cognize what it is. And it really isn't necessarily always important to know what it is. Sometimes it's really important because you need to know the etiology to cure it. But in other cases, it's not necessarily important. It's just important that it gets expressed. And on some of those occasions, people express it and they still don't want to talk about it, and then it up because it's important that they talk about. And that's common with rape, sexual abuse, anything like that, where they come in and they have a neck pain, and it's a fight or flight response that is permanently locked in, and they're stress breathing with their accessory muscles of inspiration in their neck. and it needs to be talked about. Of course, I have to change which chakra, because in another room I might have to be boisterous and outgoing and fun and all this, because I got to make a sale too. I can't just be a doctor. And so when I come back in, I have to totally change modes.
Right.
And
Right.
that's important for the medicine. Otherwise, you could actually cause damage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no one in the business who hasn't caused damage. So
That could cause us a neck sprain, just doing that. Right? Having to switch modes like that. I mean, because they're kind of antithetical, right? I mean, in a way. You know, I mean,
yeah.
they perceive
I've been zapped a few times, if that's what you're asking about. Yeah, that's why we keep tap stones in the room.
Right.
You need to be able to tap something and get that charge out of you. There are some really weird stuff that comes in my clinic, man.
Okay.
I have a lot of fun, but it can be really draining. But in a case like that one, you know, I've had several of these with the neck pain caused by past abuse, and in male and female.
Mm-hmm.
That really doesn't cause me anything at all, because these people are so guarded, and their energy is so contained within them that they have a hard time really coming out and affecting other people, which can be bad for their life too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was just got done watching an episode of Minefield with Michael Stevens. Have you heard of it? You know, Vsauce, Michael Stevens?
Yeah. I subscribe to Vsauce, but go ahead and tell me. I don't know if I've seen that.
So I just got done watching this episode, and basically all of Minefield is psychological studies, and he's a psychologist throughout it. And there's a thing called neural enchantment, and it completely is built up on, and it reminds me of what you keep talking about. The client comes in and heals themselves. You put the needles in, you put them in this right spot in the meridians, wherever they go, you know, your science there. But in this episode, these kids had severe problems. I mean, very severe problems. And by giving them a set of false premises and making it look like they were going into an MRI, this is actually they keep doing studies on this. It's a fake MRI machine, and they bring people in there and they tell them that they're getting healed, and they literally get healed. But the whole process of it is you have to make it seem as real as possible. People in lab coats, big machines, and a lot of this, they keep finding that it's placebo over and over and over. Even fake surgeries, or surgeries where they cut you open, they don't do the surgery, people heal. They're healing from things like this, and it just reminds me, because they tell the kids it's them that heal, it's you that you're going to heal yourself, and it's only a suggestion that we give you. It's based off of a suggestion, and then they make up their minds that they're going to heal themselves. And this even works on dogs. Placebo works on dogs. If you give them pills for all sorts of different ailments that they have, severe ailments that are life-threatening, and you replace them with sugar pills, the dog continues to heal off of the sugar pills. It's mind-blowing, the whole idea of placebos. I love looking into it, and the nocebo too.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that your medicine is false in any way.
You don't worry about it. I've already got the research shows it didn't. But
right.
In our medicine, there is no placebo. The mind is medicine, and so
Yes.
if a sugar pill works, then you give them sugar. If water works, give them water. If pinching them on the ear and telling them to look left works, that's what, you know. It's whatever is going to work.
Yeah.
Whatever is going
and
to.
This is why
Go ahead.
Superstitions could be so real, and be so long lasting.
Well, guys,
You know.
consciousness is first. Perhaps the placebo is the surgery. The real actual cut the guy open and sew him back up. Meaning that the belief that the physical intervention in the disease cures it is a belief, a perception. If we go out and we use other means that are begin and end in consciousness, the universe is conscious, and there is the beginning and the end of our existence. For us to distinguish between placebo and non-placebo is making an error of causality. Or should we say, because it happens in a temporal sequence, we infer causation. Causality is something that comes from above, from whence all of the order emanates and precipitates into the physical environment. Again, we have a limited perception of our multidimensional being, and we keep on making logical errors of causation because we are convinced that there must be a physical effect, cause and effect relationship, and we are convinced it must be concurrent or subsequent, but must be follow one to the other in time. And we rarely notice that we are draping the events with our own prejudices. That's why science is so important in the sense of a quality control of thought. When you come down to it and you are real and consequent with thought, I have to agree that I cannot know whether it was a physical intervention or a means of my spirit to enact the change in the physical world, for which I am not, for which I do not have the senses to experience. This is a fundamental problem of consciousness, sensory experience, and logic. It's a fundamental process and a fundamental problem for humanity. 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and so much in the future as well. Over.
Yeah, to some degree, dualism is going to be a difficulty for humanity because in the law of polarity, you have both the complementary aspect and they also do mutually oppose from time to time. So it is a struggle, I think, on a biological level and a psychological level for us to avoid separating them. That's why, you know, Chinese, they never saw things in terms of a placebo. But I also, in sticking up for the empirical approach, I think it's important that we do be able to measure some kind of physical change. So I understand whenever I have a doctor, you know, and she just really has a hard time believing in it, even when she feels the weird stuff. And I understand the need for them to have some kind of physical proof or, you know, some kind of random controlled trial, double blind placebo test. I totally understand it. Not all the ways is that appropriate. In fact, especially with acupuncture, you can't really do double blind placebos, and any attempt to just doesn't make any sense because it's intervention therapy. But I think that we could find a balance between the needs of the West and the wisdoms of the East, and that's probably going to be in accepting all the different aspects of the polar law. Sometimes unification and avoiding dualities is so vital, and in other times appreciating that there will be a dichotomy that exists. Some people do need mental health treatment, and if you try to give them pills or you just tell them go take a jog, it's not gonna work for them, you know. And we call those layers, different layers, and the layers touch, but they are their own layers.
You know, this is a psychological problem here in the world. The suicides and depression and Ambien is the #1 prescribed drug in the United States here. And then I look directly at these things that Michael produces, and I see a direct correlation with a lot of the stuff that he talks about. and society at the same time. Like take, for example, the nocebo effect, where someone tells you that you're feeling pain, and then they keep telling you that you're feeling pain, and at first you don't feel it, but then you start feeling it, and then you start feeling it more and more. The more they suggest that you're feeling pain, the more you're going to feel pain. And this comes directly from propaganda. The stuff that's on TV and the stuff that is around us, the ads and things like that, they make us feel bad. And by everything, even though there's no pain there, there is pain. But they're telling us that there's pain. They're telling us that there's and by they, I mean, you look at the grand scheme, at least over here in the United States, and you can see why 50 to 55-year-old white males are blowing their brains out more than anybody else. Suicide used to be more of a teen and 20s and 30-year-old thing. But it comes down to a large, grand scale nocebo effect. And you can make the whole entire population feel like crap from one orchestrated event or a series of orchestrated events, and then the media continuing to cover certain things that just drown you in. And even if you get away from it, you can't get away from it.
But don't you think that that's an internal conflict, and that maybe we're creating that for ourselves? Like, it doesn't necessarily have to be the media telling you that you're in pain. If you have the inkling that, like from, say, some past experience, right? You have some past experience, or someone else that has an experience, right? That you share with them, that you're part of their life while they're having that experience. Then that in and of itself is enough to say, maybe, set yourself up for the same experience, the same type of suffering. And that maybe it isn't that the media is telling us that we should feel this way. I mean, life reflects art, or does art reflect life? I think that it might be rooted more in ourselves and our expression of how we're feeling right now, as opposed to some daunting thing out on the outside that's pressuring us to feel this way. Because if we didn't feel this way, we wouldn't allow that.
The only reason I'm blaming it on the media. Right. The only reason I'm blaming it on the media.
It's a reflection of ourselves. That's what I'm saying.
Okay. I see what you're saying, but the only reason I'm blaming it on the media is because and the propaganda is because that's what spreads it, and that's what people see, and that's whether we like it or not, it's there. And there's happy places all around the world that don't have propaganda, but they're also miserable in certain ways as well. I mean, we could talk about our crave for sadistic desires as a society. The more horrible content that we put out on Netflix and these shows that just fill you with nothing but carnage. I mean, that can't be.
Yeah, but what you see, I mean, bottom line is what you see is what you get. So if you choose to see the same thing differently, you're going to get something different out of it. And they can show us all the same movie, and we're all going to see it differently. And so how is that movie? I understand the intent of propaganda and why they would build a machine to look that way. But if you choose to look at it differently, it doesn't have to be that way. So I guess what I'm saying is, just like you said, that there was other societies that weren't bombarded with things like this, and they were still happy and sad in their own ways. But maybe the reason that they don't allow themselves to be bombarded by this is because it isn't applicable in any way, like relatable to the way they feel. So they don't embrace it as some sort of an expression the way we embrace these, quote, propaganda, because it's something that we feel we need to see, or something that validates some feeling that we already feel inside of ourselves. So it's like, oh yeah, this is what it is. So it's accepted and promoted by us.
Right. Either way, whether I watch the series, whether I watch Game of Thrones or not, that I walk by hundreds of people daily and drive by them daily, that's a part of their spirit. That's a part of their car. That's a part of their brain. That's a part of their mind field. That's a part of their heart, and whether I watch the crazy shit that's out or not, it's a part of all of our hearts. And that's, the content producers' agenda comes right back down to who owns it and the money.
Well, okay, so I think what you're getting at the heart of this interesting, super fabulous discussion is whether or not you allow your own individual frequency to be modulated by the information that's coming in, whatever the shape of the information, however you want to picture that. Is do you accept it? How are you seeing it? How are you receiving it? Are you letting it pass through you or by you? Are you to it? Are you incapable of attaching to it? But it doesn't still have an effect because of some kind of pressure that it puts on either society you or on your family. All of that, I think, is going to come out in the wash. Kind of an average experience is going to really depend a lot on the attitude of the person, their mental sail, and how they go about seeing the world. There's two wheels on the karma. There's the wheel you steer using the 8 laws and the 8-spoked wheel, and then there's the wheel that drives over top of you and crushes you. It just depends on whether or not you like to get out in front of things or kind of let things flow. There's arguments that have been posed in mystic arts from both sides, and there's even been the argument, of course, that you can't do anything, and so just be a drunk. That argument's been posed as well, or that God does everything.
Yeah, there's so many beautiful reality tunnels, and I love how we can create a brand new one tomorrow. Like, it often makes me wonder where these folklore come from, and can we start a new Sasquatch or Chupacabra or legends? How do we fabricate a new legend overnight and have everybody just squawk in terror or disbelief or whatever?
Well, obviously there is the big lie told often enough, people will start to believe it. There's that method, but I think it needs to be somewhat organic. There is something to viralicity, and there are people who do. That's what they do for a job, viral marketing. They figured it out. Obviously, the food companies figured it out. They figured out how to combine marketing, childhood, and chemical receptors to get people. And even if you're not buying their product, you're going to buy somebody else's product, and then once you eat that product, you're going to want their product. So there are ways to hack this biology and psychology that we have, and do that. I'm personally in the business. This is just me, and it's just my personal what I want for people of trying to help people have duh. Of course, most people are familiar with Tao, but duh is the personal actualized experience of Tao. And
duh.
Duh, and it means empowerment. And of course, it goes right back. It's a plasma glyph, by the way.
Nice.
And this concept of this inner power, again, is based in the heart. If you read the oldest Taoist text that isn't the one that was on a jade knob, the oldest Taoist text is the Ne Ye. It says very specifically that it's stored in the chest. When you take the vital energy and you store it in the chest, then you have duh. And if you have duh, it says specifically that the animals can't claw you, and the people can't harm you, and the heavenly disasters can't find you. That's exactly what it says. And that's the experience. That's the Daniel story, right? Daniel in the cave. So, is that a real reality, or is that, if the person is experiencing Tao at the moment and then they didn't happen to get eaten by a lion, so then they tell themselves, hey, I didn't get eaten by a lion. So I feel,
right.
It's hard to prove or disprove it, because it may be a completely quantum effect, and maybe in the reality they're sharing. Right, there's the famous saying, he who knows does not speak, and he who speaks does not know, which really literally means he who is in the knowing is not speaking, he who's in the gnosis, and he who is in the knowing will not be speaking. So those people that are enjoying that together, how do we find them, and how do we test them for disease and unpleasantries and etc.? I know for me personally, I am just dying to be at the wrong place at the wrong time to practice my martial arts, and I'm never there, and it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating, because when bad things happen to good people, it ticks me off. but it just doesn't. I just never get to have those experiences. So I don't know.
I have a this I would call him an acquaintance of our group of friends and stuff. But I shouldn't even say it. Yeah, he drives out to Flint and goes finds those things, those problems himself. You desire it, but it avoids you because the universe knows.
It would be great if mankind spent some time really putting money into researching these topics or researching the changes, because how things rotate, but then they come out different somehow. That's big money. I don't know why we haven't done that as a species, and I do think I think it's important. Obviously, there is a lot of money in creating propaganda and manipulating people, but hopefully that time will end. I mean, it depends on which camp you're in. Some people think it'll end.
Right. I mean, I think we've been so thick in it that it's kind of, there's a survival aspect to it, that there's kind of a kickback. That's, at least it feels like it's happening. Talk about gearing up for a little bit of conflict, right? But I think just the fact that I think it's been true since we've formed, the ability to write ultimately. So it's been around a long time, but the ability to manipulate reality through that to someone else's advantage, or the author's advantage, or whoever they're working for, their advantage. I think there's a bit of a sea change going on with that, because it's been so much of it that there has to be a balancing.
What do other people think? Ignacio, Heather, Eugene, do you think that the world is changing, or do you think that we're going to end up in the same wash, kind of huge positives and huge negatives?
Well, I think that first, let me go to those who heal do not destroy. Combat is not for the healers. Either you heal with your chi or you combat with your chi, but they don't mix. And two, the world will always be the mess it is. Those that what changes is our souls, our minds, our consciousness. We obtain freedom, emotional freedom. We obtain a deeper and wider consciousness. And the more consciousness one has, the less a need for an explanation of process is required. So for tens or hundreds of thousands of years, this place has been a mess. What changes is us. We move through it onto a higher level. Over.
I kind of, in a way, completely disagree with that, because I feel that destruction is necessary for healing. Because if you have some kind of like microbic infestation and you want to destroy that to heal yourself, if you have a cup that's full, can't be filled. Any of those ideas of like something has to be taken out in order for something new to be established, which means that if something has been destroyed, if it hadn't been destroyed, there wouldn't be a need for healing. And then something else has to be taken out to make room for the new growth. So in order for us to develop further, we have to continue to destroy and rebirth, to destruct and reconstruct. And that is part of the never-ending cycle, and it has nothing to do with humanity, except that humanity is a part of that cycle. So it isn't ourselves that's destructive and reconstructive, it's just the nature of things. And since we are of nature, it is the nature of us. That's how I feel about that. I don't think it's something we should try to get away from. I think it's something that we should try to and turn the benefits of, instead of, because there's also, you can overheal something too. And then there's no room for growth. Then you hit stagnation. Then maybe something is healed so well that it's taken over an entire thing, and it's become the only thing that is, in turn, wiping out diversity, which is destruction.
So
you see what I'm saying?
And nature
questioning.
preserves novelty, and that goes all the way down to viruses. They could be the most novel creatures that we know of.
I wasn't.
Well, because maybe it's that one thing that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I wasn't knocking the catabolic and anabolic aspects of nature. Ramon was talking about beating someone up with martial arts, not
Right, but there's the spiritual warrior, right? There's the art of war. There's a reason for it. If somebody is destroying an entire culture, someone's taken over land that doesn't belong to them, if someone is causing grave injustice, that person, thing, entity, situation must be destroyed in order for the healing to come that you're talking about. So there is, I mean, there is spiritual warriors. There is cause for fight for justice. It has its role. It's when we use this destructive power to adversely affect that it becomes the negative that we associate with it, because we forget that we can use it to heal things too.
To be completely clear, I was talking about being in the right place to help someone who's under attack, just so that people know what I was talking about.
Oh, not just to kick some random ass.
No, I'm talking about like being on the airplane when it's being
right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So people understand, but I completely agree with Heather. You can't have only an allopathic approach. You can't have only a scorched earth approach. You can't Napoleon the world, but you do need to have a complex way of dealing with it. In medicine, generally speaking, is a lot of war. But she is also right in that there is, I've noticed, if you over equalize things, that can also be bad, because there needs to be, somebody mentioned earlier, the gradient, that difference of potential.
Life together.
Absolutely important for generating energy and generating the forces of life. Is there needs to be that potential difference. So it's okay for a couple to have fights. It's a good thing. It's a healthy thing for the yin yang to have a opposition, as long as we transform it into the next stage, right? And then it flows back into the coupling. And I think that is a totally natural part of life.
So, some of it, I mean, the thing that it kind of keeps coming to me is there's no cognization of it. It just kind of happens, and that the ability to let go of being, because I've always been trying to figure out the nuts and bolts of everything, and in many exotic ways. But I find the best things these days come out of play. And it's interesting, the word recreation, it's recreation, and I mean, and wordplay and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's a project like a little kid, and then it becomes fun, but it can be, it can be dangerous too. But it's also, it seems that we're, one of the biggest problems is we're too full of ourselves. I think you let go of it and let it just happen. It's more pleasant. Is that a cop-out?
No,
that was a bit fortune.
Spiritual
no offense. It was a bit fortune cookie, but that's fine.
I know. Sorry. Yeah.
Fortune cookies are great.
It's a fortune cookie. I know.
I love fortune cookies.
But it's from someone who has gone in and try to get some really exotic, superior, intellectual, just the model of something, and then you wake up and there's like some very, very simple solution to it that wasn't even in
and it's always a 4-letter word, love.
Can be, but it's like, that sounds like a fortune cookie.
Yeah, that was the argument. That was the argument of
masters say. That's what
that was.
Come down to that.
There was a master, and he was the first hippie, as far as we can tell. His name was Master Mo, and Confucius and them couldn't stand him. And this man, he was so good. He was so good at defensive arts. He would defend a country, and he would have to flee to that state because the king would be mad at him that he couldn't invade. And then when he showed up, they would lock the gate and keep him out because they were afraid that he would stop them from invading other states. So Master Mo, he was all about that. Heaven was love, literally love.
Yeah, so am I.
I think it's been stated many times, and it's like I keep on getting too
fortune cookie or no fortune cookie on that one. I think nobody's gonna pop that bubble.
Yeah.
I've been studying the patterns of. I mean, I'm a naturalist, so, and I love watching nature shows, and I was watching some earlier this week, and I couldn't help but notice that the love dance between all creatures has to do typically with the brightest color flamingo is the best mate. So then it takes all of the other flamingos to have to interpret that pattern, to interpret that as a good thing. And you know, the females that are able to recognize that the pinkest one is the mate to go for are the ones that are going to procreate. But then you go to the blue booties, and the blue booties, the most favored mate is the darkest blue feet. So color, intensity of color, and then you go to the birds of paradise, and it's a dance, the greatest dance, you know, and it fills my mind with awe and wonder about the dance of love and how we all kind of forget that this all comes down to mating. You know, we're all like thinking about, and then ultimately mating is the mating pairs, which you know, we talk about, but yeah, the mating pairs of everything, and mated pairs of opposing spiral vortices all the way down to the quantum level. But
yeah, mating is not love. Love is about something else. Attraction and mating go together, but love goes with taking, you know, helping the other one reach their highest and truest self. Mm-hmm. Love goes to compassion and goes to the savvy and the wisdom to not succumb to the other person's problem, but to find a way that both can become stronger and truer. That's not the same thing as polarity and attraction and repulsion, polarity and mating and procreation. We're two different levels of existence. Oh,
but it does come down to creativity inside of the individual, because the flamingo that's going to have the brightest pink is going to be the most creative, because it's going to be able to reach, most likely the strongest, reach the waters with the pinkest shrimp. And the other ones are going to be like, you know, salmon colored, because they're getting it from the Gringy water and the whiter shrimp. And
is it true, or is it just like somebody's?
This is true. This is a fact. Yeah. So like, you think about this stuff, and it's just so strange that it comes down to novelty, and then nature preserves novelty. It loves novelty. It tries to keep it and sustain it, and that's what mating is. That's what procreation is the sustainability of novelty and creativity. Because the strongest person isn't always as we see it, you know, and as the Disney cartoons paint it, the strong person, like the princess needs the strong, big, brute guy, but he might be a little dumb, but hey, that don't matter. Nowadays, it's the geeks are in style because they're the nerds, because they're the ones reading the books, and they're the ones, you know, that are ultimately creative and running Silicon and the banks probably now. But I mean, sorry, my mind meanders.
And you're creating your own universe. You're creating your own reality with all of that. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be that way. You see it that way, and you have to ask yourself whether you're locking yourself to one particular mode of existence because it rhymes you are right now.
Well, I don't think anybody in here is particularly locked in. I've not seen this great a concentration of weird dragons in a long time.
Oh, cool. Thanks. It's probably a good time just to kind of keep it less is more, but and just we can kind of, what's the right word for it? Kind of muse and ruminate on everything. But we could kind of wind it down now, and just a great conversation post our little field trip, which was wonderful. And
I like your painting of the dragons, colorful dragons. I'm seeing feathers everywhere.
Yeah. Well, you guys are definitely it, man. I've never. I mean, I have encountered eclectic groups, but not many of them are capable of being hard and soft at the same time. So.
Oh,
They're
great!
pretty
Great. We're working on it. We're getting better. We you know.
No, you guys are
So,
wonderful.
yeah.
You guys are wonderful.
Thanks.
Thanks, you too. That's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Part
yeah.
of that's why we're all here, birds of the same feather.
There we go. Yeah, we're all peacocks.
And
So look out.
There's I have a bunch of stuff on the news. We can do it on a different episode, but I'm loading it up on some cool stuff.
Oh,
that,
do you? You want to practice like a little 3-minute teaser?
We
No, we
could.
could do it next. Or however you feel about it. Be funny.
Maybe next time,
Okay.
because we're winding down, like you said.
Sure.
But,
Okay, sounds great.
Thunderbird. I just wanted to say I'd
Ooh,
say we're
yeah.
Thunderbirds if you look into that.
I was
Native
playing with
American
that one.
Thunderbird.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Bring it up real fast here. Thunder nerds, right?
Yeah, Thunder Nerds, Thunderbirds. Yeah, I didn't know that I was one until this lady approached me and told me exactly what was going on, and I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Did something happen when you were 19?" And I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, it usually happens in the 19th year of their growth." And the geometry came to me when I was 19 in the series of visions. So I've been studying them a little bit here and there.
Right. Very cool. All right. So on that